The morning sun glinted off the crystal blue water of Mark Donovan's newly installed in-ground pool, casting dancing reflections across his patio. After 15 years of saving, planning, and navigating the labyrinthine permit process, Mark had finally achieved his dream, a backyard oasis where his two children could splash and play during sweltering Arizona summers. 3 weeks of construction had transformed his dusty backyard into something from a resort brochure. It was perfect. It was also, according to Eleanor Winters from the Saguaro Hills Homeowners Association, completely unauthorized. Mark was still in his bathrobe, coffee mug in hand, when the rapid staccato knocking began at his front door. He opened it to find Eleanor, 60-something with a pageboy haircut and perpetually pursed lips, clutching her HOA rulebook like a religious text. "Mr. Donovan," she said, not waiting for a greeting, "I've received reports that you've installed a swimming pool without HOA approval. Section 7, paragraph 12 of our community guidelines clearly states that all exterior modifications require written authorization from the board." Mark took a slow sip of his coffee. "Good morning to you too, Eleanor. I have all the necessary permits from the city. I submitted the HOA paperwork 3 months ago." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "I have no record of any submission. And even if you did submit something, you never received approval. The pool needs to be removed immediately." Mark laughed, which only made Eleanor's expression harden. "I'm not removing the $45,000 pool because of paperwork. I followed the process. If it got lost somewhere on your end, that's not my problem." "This isn't a joke, Mr. Donovan. You're in violation. The board will discuss this at our next meeting, and you'll be facing significant fines until the situation is remedied." After Eleanor left, Mark dug through his files and found his copy of the HOA submission, complete with the date stamped from when he dropped it in Eleanor's mailbox at the community center. He scanned it and emailed it to the entire HOA board, along with copies of his city permits. Problem solved, he thought. The next 2 weeks passed pleasantly. Mark's children, Emma and Tyler, spent every afternoon after school in the pool. His wife, Lisa, hosted her book club on the new patio furniture. Mark even waved to Eleanor when he saw her power walking through the neighborhood, though she never acknowledged him. On Friday, Mark left early for a weekend fishing trip with college friends. Lisa and the kids were visiting her parents in Tucson, so the house would be empty until Sunday evening, something Mark had mentioned at the corner store within earshot of several neighbors, including Eleanor's husband. When Mark returned late Sunday, exhausted but content after catching a record-sized bass, he found 3 police cars parked in front of his house. His next-door neighbor, Jim Peterson, rushed over as Mark pulled into his driveway. "Mark, I'm so sorry. I was in Phoenix visiting my daughter. I just got back an hour ago and called the police immediately." "What? What happened?" Mark asked, his stomach dropping. "It's your pool," Jim said, his face grave. "Someone, well, everyone knows who, dumped what looks like several tons of ready-mixed concrete into it. It's completely filled. Destroyed." Mark pushed past Jim and ran to his backyard. Where his beautiful pool had been just 3 days ago was now a crude, uneven slab of partially cured concrete. Pieces of his children's pool toys protruded from the gray mass like artifacts in an archaeological dig. The poolside furniture was buried underneath the concrete, with only the tips of umbrella poles visible. A police officer approached. "Mr. Donovan, I'm Detective Rodriguez. We'd like to ask you some questions. Security footage from your neighbor's house shows a concrete mixer truck entering your property on Saturday morning. The driver appears to have been accompanied by a woman matching the description of your HOA president, Eleanor Winters." Mark stared at the ruined pool, the destroyed toys, the weeks of work and years of savings now entombed in concrete. His children's summer joy, Lisa's proud entertaining, his own peaceful evening swims, all gone. "She didn't just destroy a pool," Mark said quietly, "and I don't think she has any idea what she's actually done." Detective Rodriguez nodded. "Criminal property damage at this scale is a felony, sir. And if it was premeditated as it appears, Ms. Winters is in very serious trouble." The next 48 hours passed in a blur for Mark. After giving his statement to the police, he faced the hardest conversation of his life, telling Lisa and the children about their destroyed pool. The kids' tearful reactions tore at his heart, especially when Emma asked if they could still go swimming tomorrow. Lisa, initially stunned into silence, eventually found her voice. "How could anyone do something so malicious?" she whispered, staring at the photos Mark had taken. "This isn't just petty revenge, it's unhinged." Mark had no answer. The detective had advised him not to confront Eleanor directly, as she was already being brought in for questioning. By Monday afternoon, the local news had picked up the story. HOA president fills homeowner's pool with concrete, ran across the bottom of the evening broadcast. Mark's phone buzzed constantly with messages from friends, colleagues, and neighbors expressing disbelief and support. On Tuesday morning, Mark met with his insurance agent, who looked increasingly uncomfortable as they reviewed the policy details. I have to be honest with you, Mark. This is unusual. Homeowners insurance typically covers damage from accidents, theft, or natural disasters. Intentional vandalism by an HOA president isn't something we encounter often. But is vandalism, Mark insisted. Criminal vandalism. The agent nodded. Yes, but there's a coverage limit for vandalism, and this exceeds it by about $35,000. We can cover $10,000, but the rest? He trailed off with a grimace. As Mark left the insurance office, his phone rang. Detective Rodriguez. Mr. Donovan, we've made an arrest. Ms. Winters is being charged with criminal mischief, trespassing, and felony property damage. The concrete company driver has also been charged as an accomplice. He claims Ms. Winters told him she was the property owner and had hired him to fill in an unauthorized excavation. What happens now? Mark asked. Ms. Winters has been released on bail. There will be an arraignment, then likely a trial unless she accepts a plea deal. Given the evidence, the DA is confident. But I should warn you, civil restitution for damages can take time, even with a criminal conviction. Mark thanked the detective and hung up, only to find 3 voicemails waiting. The first was from a local TV reporter requesting an interview. The second was from a lawyer offering to represent him in a civil suit. The third made his blood run cold. Mark, this is Richard Winters, Eleanor's husband. The voice was strained, uncomfortable. I want you to know I had nothing to do with what Eleanor did. It was completely without my knowledge. She's not well, Mark. She's been under psychiatric care for the past year. Her medication, well, she stopped taking it recently. I'm not excusing what she did, but I'm hoping we can resolve this without ruining both our families. Please call me back. That evening, the Donovan family sat in their living room with Greg Harmon, a lawyer recommended by a colleague. The children had been sent to stay with friends for the night, unable to sleep in a house where the topic of conversation kept returning to their destroyed backyard paradise. You have an extremely strong case for a civil suit, Harmon explained. The criminal charges will likely stick, but that doesn't automatically get your pool replaced. We need to sue both Eleanor and potentially the HOA itself. The HOA? Lisa asked. Why them? Eleanor acted alone, because she was acting in her capacity as HOA president, enforcing what she believed were the rules. The HOA may bear some liability, especially if they've enabled her behavior in the past. Eleanor Winters sat ramrod straight in the defendant's chair at her arraignment, her silver blue hair freshly styled, wearing a crisp beige pantsuit that screamed respectability. Mark watched from the gallery as she pleaded not guilty to all charges. Her attorney, an expensively dressed woman named Melissa Sandoval, requested that the judge consider Eleanor's distinguished record of community service and ongoing medical condition when setting bail conditions. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, adjusted her glasses and reviewed the case file. Ms. Winters, you've been charged with criminal mischief in the first degree, criminal trespass, and felony property damage exceeding $25,000. These are serious charges. She looked up at Eleanor. You currently serve as president of the Saguaro Hills Homeowners Association. Yes, Your Honor, Eleanor replied with dignified composure. For 12 years. And it was in this capacity that you took it upon yourself to destroy Mr. Donovan's swimming pool by filling with concrete. Eleanor's lawyer quickly interjected. Your Honor, we're not conceding those facts. My client maintains her innocence. The judge raised an eyebrow. The security footage from the neighbor's house showing Ms. Winters directing a concrete truck onto Mr. Donovan's property would seem to make innocence a difficult position to maintain. Scattered murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Mark saw Eleanor's shoulders tense, but her expression remained impassive. Bail will remain as set, the judge continued. The defendant is to have no contact with the Donovan family or any other Saguaro Hills residents who may be witnesses in this case. She is to resign immediately from her position with the HOA. Eleanor's composure finally cracked. But, Your Honor, I've devoted my life to maintain the standards of our community. That position is my life's work. It appears, Ms. Winters, that your life's work has crossed the line into criminal behavior, the judge replied coldly. Next case. Outside the courthouse, Mark found himself surrounded by news cameras. He had prepared his statement with his attorney, but was still taken aback by the intensity of the attention. Local media had been covering the story extensively, dubbing it Concrete Gate and using it as a launching point for broader discussions about HOA overreach. Mr. Donovan, a reporter called out, will you be pursuing a civil suit against Ms. Winters? Before Mark could answer, Greg Harmon stepped forward. My client has filed a civil complaint against both Eleanor Winters and the Saguaro Hills Homeowners Association for the destruction of property valued at over $45,000, as well as emotional distress and related damages. Additionally, we've been approached by numerous other residents with similar complaints of harassment and selective rule enforcement. We're exploring the possibility of a class action lawsuit. The announcement sent the reporters into a frenzy of questions, but Harmon expertly guided Mark away from the courthouse steps. As they walked to the parking lot, Mark's phone rang. "Lisa, how did it go?" she asked. Eleanor pleaded not guilty, but she looked rattled when the judge ordered her to resign from the HOA. Mark replied, "And Harmon just announced our civil suit to the press. I think things are finally moving in the right direction." "Good," Lisa said. "The kids are asking when they can go swimming again. I've been trying to explain that it's going to take time, but I don't really understand." Mark's heart sank. "Tell them I'm working on it. Maybe we can look into community pool memberships for the summer." "Already did. The HOA has openings in their swim program." After hanging up, Mark was surprised to find Richard Winters waiting by his car. Eleanor's husband looked haggard, his normally pristine golf attire rumpled, his eyes bloodshot. "Mark," he said, approaching cautiously. "Can we talk?" "Just for a minute." Mark glanced at Harmon, who nodded. "5 minutes," the lawyer said. "I'll be right over there." Richard ran a hand through his thinning hair. "I know you have every right to be angry. What Eleanor did was, I can't even find the words. Unforgivable. Insane." He took a deep breath. "The thing is, Mark, she actually is unwell. She's been diagnosed with a personality disorder with paranoid features. When she's on her medication, she functions normally, but she stopped taking it about 3 months ago, claiming it made her foggy." The grinding, whining sound of industrial equipment filled the air as workers attacked the concrete slab in Mark's backyard. A month had passed since Eleanor's arraignment, and the removal of the concrete was proving more difficult than anticipated. The foreman of the pool company approached Mark, who was monitoring the work from his patio. "We've hit a snag," the foreman said, wiping sweat from his brow. The concrete wasn't just dumped in, it was mixed with rebar and what looks like chunks of cinder blocks, almost like someone was trying to make it impossible to remove. Mark shook his head in disbelief. "She really thought of everything, didn't she?" "We'll need specialized equipment. They'll add about a week to the timeline and increase the cost by around $5,000. "Do what you need to do," Mark replied. The HOA agreed to cover all expenses. As the foreman walked away, Mark's phone buzzed with a text from Greg Harmon. "Call me. News about Winter's case." 10 minutes later, Mark was pacing in his living room, phone pressed to his ear. "She wants to do what?" "Plead guilty," Harmon repeated. "But with conditions. Her attorney is proposing a deal to the DA. She'll plead guilty to criminal mischief and property damage if the trespassing charge is dropped. She'd serve no jail time but would be placed under house arrest with electronic monitoring for 6 months, followed by 3 years of probation. She'd also be required to continue psychiatric treatment and medication compliance." "What about restitution?" Mark asked. "That's where it gets interesting. Richard Winters has offered to place $100,000 in an escrow account immediately, $50,000 for your family and $50,000 for a community fund to address other complaints against Eleanor." Mark was silent for a moment. "What happens with our civil suit?" "If you agree to this arrangement, you drop the suit against Eleanor personally but could proceed against the HOA, though they've already offered a very reasonable settlement. The class action would be resolved through the community fund. I need to discuss this with Lisa." That evening, after the children were asleep, Mark and Lisa sat on their front porch swing, watching fireflies blink in the warm Arizona dusk. "What do you think?" Mark asked after explaining the proposed deal. Lisa was quiet for a long moment. "Part of me still wants her to face every possible consequence," she admitted. "But another part of me sees Richard, a man who loves his wife despite her illness, trying desperately to get her the help she needs." She turned to Mark. "And I keep thinking about the kids. Do we want them to see this drag out for years in court? Or do we want them to see that justice and compassion can sometimes work together?" Mark nodded slowly. "I've been thinking the same thing. Plus, this way, the neighborhood gets some healing too. That community fund could help a lot of people who've been hurt by Eleanor over the years." "Then I think we have our answer," Lisa said softly. 2 weeks later, Mark sat in the courtroom as Eleanor Winters stood before the judge, flanked by her attorney and husband. She looked markedly different, thinner, more subdued, the imperious posture replaced by a slight stoop. "Ms. Winters, do you understand the terms of this plea agreement?" the judge asked. "Yes, Your Honor," Eleanor replied, her voice barely audible. "And you understand that by pleading guilty, you are admitting that you deliberately destroyed Mr. Donovan's property by filling his swimming pool with concrete?" Eleanor's hands trembled slightly. "Yes, Your Honor." "Very well. The court accepts your plea of guilty to criminal mischief in the first degree and felony property damage. Before I pronounce sentence, do you have anything you wish to say to the court or to the victims of your crime?" Eleanor turned slowly, her eyes finding Mark in the gallery. For the first time since he'd known her, she looked genuinely vulnerable. "Mr. Donovan," she began, her voice cracking, "what I did was inexcusable. There's no justification for it, mental illness or not." She paused, gathering herself. I spent my entire life trying to maintain order and standards in our community. Somewhere along the way, I lost perspective. I convinced myself that rules were more important than people. When I stopped taking my medication, that distortion only worsened. She took a deep breath. I'm deeply ashamed of what I did to your family. I destroyed something precious that brought your children joy. No rule violation, real or perceived, could ever justify such an action. I can't undo the damage, but I want you to know that I am truly, profoundly sorry. Mark was surprised to find himself moved by her words. They seemed genuine, lacking the self-righteous tone that had characterized all their previous interactions. After the hearing concluded and the terms of Eleanor's house arrest were established, Richard approached Mark outside the courthouse. 1 year later, Mark Donovan stood at the podium in the Saguaro Hills Community Center, addressing the assembled homeowners as the newly elected HOA president. The past 12 months had transformed both the neighborhood and his own perspective in ways he never could have anticipated. And with the installation of the new playground equipment next month, we'll have completed all the projects approved in last quarter's budget, Mark concluded, closing his folder. Any questions before we move to new business? A hand went up from Diane Walsh, a retiree who had lived in the community for over 2 decades. I just want to say that in all my years here, I've never seen Saguaro Hills in better shape. The landscaping, the renovated community center, the new playground, and all without increasing our dues. How did you manage that? Mark smiled. Transparency and participation make a huge difference. When everyone can see where the money goes and has a voice in the decisions, we waste a lot less on fighting each other. There was a murmur of appreciative laughter. Plus, the community fund that came out of the Winters settlement has helped with several projects. The Eleanor Winters Community Restoration Fund, as it had been officially named, had indeed made a significant impact. The $50,000 Richard had contributed had been supplemented by the HOA's insurance payout and eventually grew to over $120,000. The fund had been used not only to address past grievances but also to finance improvements throughout the neighborhood. After the meeting, as residents mingled over coffee and cookies, Janet Chen, now Mark's vice president, approached him. "Have you seen the latest property value report?" she asked. "We're up 12% year over year, the highest in the county." Mark nodded. "The realtor told me yesterday. 3 families are on wait lists, just hoping someone decides to sell." As they chatted, Mark's phone buzzed with a text from Lisa. "Don't forget we promised the kids pizza and a movie tonight. Home by 7. He smiled, texting back a quick confirmation. In the years since the concrete incident, as it was now referred to in their household, his family had not only recovered but flourished. Emma had joined a competitive swim team inspired by her daily practice in their new pool. Tyler had developed an interest in architecture, fascinated by the reconstruction process and now constantly designing improvements for their home on his tablet. As Mark gathered his papers to leave, a young couple approached, the Paddles, who had moved into the Winters' old house 4 months ago. "Mr. Donovan," Raj Patel began, "we wanted to thank you for helping us with our backyard design approval. Having the committee review it in just 3 days made a huge difference with our contractor's schedule." "Call me Mark, please," he replied, shaking Raj's hand. And it was no problem. The new online system makes everything more efficient. "We've heard the stories about the previous HOA president," Raj's wife Priya added hesitantly. "It's hard to believe, considering how welcoming everyone has been to us." Mark nodded thoughtfully. It was a difficult time, but in some ways it brought the community together. Sometimes it takes something dramatic to make people realize they want a different way of doing things. On his drive home, Mark took the long route through the neighborhood, admiring the well-kept homes and friendly waves from residents working in their yards or walking dogs. He still found it surreal that he had gone from being the HOA president's nemesis to becoming the president himself. He had accepted the nomination 6 months ago after several neighbors had approached him. Their argument that his experience made him uniquely qualified to lead with both firmness and fairness had resonated with him. And to his surprise, he found that he genuinely enjoyed the role when it was focused on building community rather than policing infractions. As Mark pulled into his driveway, he saw Lisa and the kids in the backyard. Emma was doing handstands underwater while Tyler timed her on a stopwatch. Lisa lounged on one of the poolside chairs, reading a novel. The scene of domestic tranquility sparked a wave of gratitude in Mark's chest. He had received a letter from Richard Winters last month with a Phoenix return address. Richard had written that Eleanor was doing well in her treatment program and had even begun volunteering at a community garden near their new home. "She'll never be the person she was before," Richard had written, "but in many ways that's a blessing. The medication has helped, but so has the therapy. Recognizing the damage her behavior caused has been painful but necessary for her healing."